Hi, everybody, and welcome to an event of the Greenberg Center dedicated to the current predicament that we're in. And I just want to say a few words about the event, introduce the speaker, and tell you a little bit about how it's going to go in this conversation. Um, as you know, we are in the midst of a very complex war that has many actors: Iran, USA, the Trump administration, Israel, Lebanon, and many others. And actually, for all our listeners, wherever you are, we hope that your family is safe, and we really worry about, the many, 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 many civilians in the region. Um, Today, we're going to focus on one actor in this war amongst many, and that's Israel, and specifically its Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. And the question that we want to ask is, what kind of leadership are we talking about when we talk about Israel with Benjamin Netanyahu kind of helming foreign policies? And whether we can, at this point, refer to Netanyahu as a rational player. So again, it's kind of isolating one component within the many jigsaw, within the many in the puzzle. Now, the person that I'll be talking to today, my name is Orit Bashkin. I'm a historian of the modern Middle East and the interim director of the Greenberg Center. The person I will be talking to about this mess that we're all in is Lior Sternfeld, who's an associate professor of history and Jewish studies from Penn State. And Lior is a prominent historian of both Iran and its minority communities, in particular the Jewish community. His book that was published by Stanford University Press was titled Between Iran and Zion: Jewish Histories of 20th Century Iran, which looks at the sort of complicated relationship between Iranian nationalism, Iranian communism, Zionism, and constitutionalism, and how these sort of affect the Jewish Iranian community. He also recently published a Hebrew book about Iran and Iranian history called Iran Life Itself. Which was received very positively in Israel, and also caused some controversies, which is a good thing to start a talk with. So I'm going to start a conversation with Lior, and after a while, we'll open it up for questions. So welcome, Lior. Welcome all for this event. Lior, Professor Sternfeld, I should say. The first question I wanted to ask you is if you can give us a sense about what kind of Benjamin Netanyahu are we dealing with right now. So if you can take us to sort of since his formation of his government in 2022 through October 7, through the 12 days of war in 2025. How would you characterize his leadership, how he met the challenges that faced him? Did he change during these processes?
Hi, Orit. So nice to be chatting with you. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you all for joining us. Um, Netanyahu has been prime minister for most of the past 18 years, since 2009, with 1 year break between 21 and 22. In his previous coalitions, he always tried to be the he always tried to form it with center and center left parties, which gives him the advantage of being the right sorry the right wing of his coalition. But in the over the years, especially since 2018, he was over his head in corruption trial and investigation, and he was indicted. And the center left decided that they are not going to be part of his coalitions, which led to four cycles of elections within 1 year, and then the formation of the Lapid-Bennett government, which lasted for a year. Now, when he won the elections in 2022, he basically had one option, one viable option, which was to form coalition with the far right in Israel, which was a new situation for him. But they prepared many requirements that he was happy to approve, such as overhauling the judicial system, uh, expanding the settlements and the Israeli sovereignty in the West Bank. And also there was this in 2022, it still looked like a fringe win that aspired to undo the disengagement from the Gaza Strip in 2005. Uh, the year prior to October 7th, or not a year, almost a year prior to October 7th, Israel saw huge civil unrest and demonstrations 2, 3 times a week. Um, and it actually served Netanyahu pretty well because it showed that he was fighting the deep state and yeah, the deep state, and he's fighting the old elites, and he is the real representative of what another Israeli news commentator called Second Israel, which is the second class citizens of Israel, which is the Mizrahi Israelis. At the same time, he appointed Itamar Ben-Gvir to be the Minister of Interior Security, which is responsible for the police. And we saw the police becoming a political branch of the government, and especially of Ben-Gvir. And we witnessed, I don't know in percentage point, but in incredible increase in crime and death rates in the Palestinian sector of the Israeli society. So the Palestinian Israelis. Um, on October 7th, Israel, it caught Israel in the least prepared situation or condition. And Netanyahu was determined not to defeat, not to bring back the hostages, or to make sure that he's securing Israel's position. He was about to fight for his life and his political life, no matter what the cost was. And this is how the war in Gaza that evolved into the genocide started. Netanyahu knew that this is his chance to do away with the legal issues that bothered him. It's his chance to do away with any kind of opposition inside the Zionist camp in Israel. And this is also, it proved itself multiple times since October 7th, 2023, when the leaders of the opposition, or the so-called opposition, said that during wartime there's no opposition coalition, which is, it creates the ideal grounds for Netanyahu to remain prime minister for as long as he wants. So this is a bit of a recap.
So I wanted to follow up and sort of think about specifically the Iranian policy. So, and specifically following the 12 Days War in the summer of 2025, why he wanted to enter the war. And so it seems to me that there's a tension between continuities and changes in his policies. So, on the one hand, this has been a long time ambition of Netanyahu. He and former Prime Minister and the Minister of former Defense Minister Ehud Barak pushed for this idea for a long time. And yet, several American presidents of the varying political parties and Mossad heads within Israel warned against it, especially the idea of regime change. Now, from reports that were published in the New York Times, in Ynet, things that Alon Ben David said on Channel 13, there seemed to be a split opinion about going to war, even prior to the negotiations with Trump. So while Mossad, according to the New York Times and Ynet, thought that regime change was possible, other members, even within the security establishment, actually said this is not possible. The regime might survive this and kind of repeat what happened during the 1980s when it was attacked by Iraq, and that was kind of a rallying call to actually support the regime. That a war would strengthen the hardliners. And I'm reading some publications and I'm listening to interviews by people like Dani Citrinovich or Raz Zimet from the Institute for National Security Studies in Israel. And they also said, you know, this is not going to be easy. This is a great gamble. Now, Netanyahu of the past, it seems to me, was also committed in some ways to keeping the status quo. He came to power after Israel's second war in Lebanon in 2006 and saw that the failure toppled Ehud Olmert's government. And actually, one of the reasons that people say he was so, you know, self-confident about the fact that Hamas would not attack before October 7th is that he had this kind of commitment to the status quo. He thought he was invincible. He was afraid of changing the status quo. And now it seems that he kind of does a 180. He's kind of in a constant move to change the status quo. So why do you think he chose this option? Is it kind of an anxiety about his legacy that he wants to be, you know, the Churchill of the time? Is it because he saw in the 12 Days War that Israel was not attacked as he imagined it would be attacked because the assessment before the 12 Days War was grim? Is it connected to sort of his failure to achieve ultimate victory, disarmed Hamas, disarm Hezbollah, things that he had failed to do? So again, the title of our talk is What Was He Thinking? The warning signs are there. So, you know, we don't know what's happening in his head, though. We don't have, but what was he thinking?
I think that we need to divide it to a few different components. First of all, the Churchill ideas. He makes sure that every photo of him taken in his office, he has a Churchill book on his desk, and he himself made the analogies of him as the Churchillian leader that goes to the fight for the betterment of the whole world and not just for himself. And I think that he also, if you look at his political career, especially since 2009, Iran became, he needed Iran to be in the background. And I think that it served him well to be in a coalition in which he was the one supposedly being more hawkish, but having to be restrained by the other partners of his coalition, because then he could always say, I wanted to act, but I couldn't. And then the balance shifted when he formed his most recent, like his current coalition, right? Because they wanted to attack Iran and they believe that attacking Iran is the right thing. And they basically said the same thing. They want to create a new Middle East. What does it mean, a new Middle East? And there is also the component of him, as you said, wanting to leave a new legacy, another legacy that is not connected to October 7th. But it is it all goes back to October 7th and how it changed the way that Netanyahu felt liberated to do whatever he wanted in the Middle East and attack, on six fronts and drag Iran into the war after attacking the Iranian consulate in Damascus and then escalating it to attacks in Iran proper. Um, this was an opportunity for him to, first of all, the 12-day war. Um, Netanyahu always, uh, again, he has this tendency of going against the advice of the Mossad and other intelligence organizations. For example, all of the Israeli intelligence and the Western intelligence organizations said that the JCPOA, the nuclear agreement for 2015, was working well, but Netanyahu, against their advice, pushed Trump to withdraw. And so he doesn't have a problem, putting the Mossad advice at bay and proceeding with what he saw as more important. But in the 12-day war, um, he he knew that he cannot obliterate the nuclear project, the Iranian nuclear project, and I think that this is the achievement of the war actually, that he was able to keep the Iranian threat alive as a political card that he can still use in his communication with the Israeli public, but also in harnessing other world powers to maintain this threat or the status of Iran as a global threat. And the war now, I think that we have here a few options of why he decided to do it. First of all, we have elections coming, and the polls are not favorable to him. And as soon as the war started, based on the regular script, the leaders of the opposition said there's no opposition, no coalition in Israel in wartime. We are now getting much closer to the beginning of the election cycle, and I don't know if it will help him to push him to victory on elections day, but it certainly created much more favorable situation for him to run. The Israeli public, the Jewish public in Israel supports the war in very high percentage. A poll that came out last week showed that the Jewish population in Israel supports it in over 90%. And the opposition refuses to offer any alternatives. So if we're talking about what Netanyahu thinks, I don't think that it's beneath him to go to this war as part of his elections campaign.
But okay, so let me ask you a follow-up because I think like if he managed to have a greater achievement in the 12 days war, and actually, show the public that he, got rid of the proxies and got rid of the um nuclear program, wouldn't that position him in a better stage to go on to the elections? But let's keep this question kind of open. And I want to turn now to again something that you've mentioned, and that is like sort of his thought process, and that is who is he talking to? So his party seems to be quite unique, let's say, in the sense that it's more religious, more messianic, less democratic than than past even Likud formation. So, I recently reread The Iron Wall with my students and by Jabotinsky, the founder of the party. And there you sort of have like this idea, this really strong recognition that, you sort of need to be right-wing Zionist because you will have resistance from the indigenous population. But there is no mentioning of God and Holy Land and divine powers and so forth. So his party itself has shifted. He has this policy where some of his ministers are not super qualified for their positions. Like his Minister of Defense is not a man that comes with a rich military experience. After October 7th, as you noted, there seemed to be, according to press reports, a rift with the military. So, and even in the demonstration, so he's blaming the pilots, he's blaming the military leadership, his former Minister of Defense Gallant, Chief of Staff, and so forth. His own kind of office was connected to corruption charges and connections with various lobbies. So, who does he listen to? Who is like his our closest allies that kind of inspire his actions? Are those folks like Ron Drummer, his own family? Who kind of shapes? Obviously, he's very, very much in the center, and his interpersonal relationship with Trumps are very significant. But who else kind of he talks to, he bounces ideas with from what you know. And again, we're not in the office.
Yeah, I think that there is some overlap between the circles of his office and his family. His family is very much integrated into the office staff, and they are very much connected to um, circles in the American sphere of policy making. I think that he enjoys the company of Mike Huckabee, and I think you hear that the terminology shifted to sound much more evangelical than anything else. You said there's no God in Jabotinsky, but the kind of God that you hear now in Netanyahu's surrounding is not exactly. It resembles a lot of the kind of conversation that you hear from evangelical leaders. Um, I don't think that in Israel, from the Israeli political system, he has any close partners, which is, pretty typical to the kind of government that he's trying to form. He doesn't want to be challenged. He doesn't want to be offered alternatives. He wants to hear that he is right, that he's the best leader in Jewish history, that he is the most important leader in the world, that he is leading the free world in fight against darkness and evil. And I think that Ron Dermer and his likes are, serving this kind of image. He wants people like he wants the attention and maybe the advice of people like Miriam Edelson or powerful people that maybe he fears are more powerful than him, and then he is willing to maybe to get their advice or guidance in some way. And you see that in Israel, it doesn't really talks to the public. He doesn't give interviews. He doesn't do press conferences. I don't think that he actually has some kind of meaningful conversation with anyone in the Israeli public, and he also was able to transform the military, the Shin Bet, the interior security organization, and most of the intelligence community to be more of the to be appointed. He appointed more of his loyals to key positions. So even if before October 7th he was sometimes pushed back or challenged by the Shin Bet or the Mossad. Now it's obvious that no one there is willing to to be thrown under the bus by him, basically.
Okay, so then I have the next question is like, so what is the end game of this war? Because presently the Iranian leadership doesn't seem to give up, and actually hardliners are in control. And negotiations, at least as of this morning, don't seem to go anywhere. It might have changed. Um, so let's say that like in the next month or so, regime change doesn't happen. So what is the end goal right now and how it might be spun if it fails? Now, you mentioned the Israeli support for the war. So the war was sold to the Israeli public as the termination of an existential threat. That once Iran falls, all the proxies fall. So no Hezbollah, no Hamas, no Houthis. And that the regime change would happen in Iran. And given the current demonstration, the Iranians themselves, or large portions of them, are yearning for a change. And they themselves don't want the regime. They don't want their money spent on all these proxies. So there are good chances for this war to succeed. And that was the narrative that was sold, right? So we're terminating an existential threat, and we will get rid of the proxies. And the Air Force will help us destroy the ballistic missiles and so forth. But I do see that the media, not all the media, but certain articles in Haaretz by Ori Misgav and Raviv Drucker, and yeah, articles by Agil Levy and other voices in the media have been more critical, much more than in the past 2 years. So can public opinion change? And then what? So then the question is again, how do you see like Netanyahu's thinking about the end game now? And do you think that this kind of overwhelming public support for this war persisting as the end game changes and the Israeli cities and communities are suffering?
This is a great question, and I think that going into this war, it should have been clear that regime change is possible only with boots on the ground. Airstrikes cannot topple a regime, and assassinating the heads of the regime doesn't collapse the regime. This was obvious to anyone who knows Iran, and the narrative that was sold was one of a quick and determined war that will end in great achievements, short time, and again will change the Middle East for good, right? Just as the Gaza war did, just as the war in Lebanon did, just as any other war that was launched in the past few years changed. Um,
He's saying this cynically, guys.
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. So I think that the support for the war will decline when people see that everything that was promised is not going to be delivered, and the price is getting higher. Today I saw Amit Segal, one of the he's not a journalist, but
propagandists.
propagandist, said that the Iranians still fire rockets, but with no joy. There's no joy in how they fire rockets. And said, "Oh wow, so these are actually sad rockets." So,
Yeah.
um, but so I think that the price that the Israeli public is paying now is higher than anyone anticipated. Um, and it will continue to be so. And I think that we also have to say that now it's no longer Netanyahu that is calling the shots. And I'm not sure that it's even Trump. Now the Iranian regime feels more emboldened to call the shots and to reject, whatever proposal Trump gave. I heard this today that the Iranian regime said that they are willing to negotiate, but not on those terms. Um, and so the end goal for Netanyahu, I think, will now to be able to claim whatever as his victory, and if a revolution will start organically in Iran, it will claim that it was because of the war. Uh, but right now there's no scenario in which he can claim any kind of meaningful victory. The Iranian regime is again can be toppled only from a ground operation, not airstrikes. And with President Trump, we never know, but right now it doesn't look like he's inclined to do that. So one thing is certain. Both Netanyahu, Trump, and whoever will lead Iran in the day the war ended will all claim victory. And then we'll have to see what happened, like what changed since the war started. Will Iran be less isolated and more integrated in the economy? Will sanctions be lifted or not? Will the US continue its support for Israeli military adventures or not? Will the US be more committed to fighting Iran? Right now, there's no way yeah, I think, to determine what kind of victory still possible. We will have to see the conditions on the day the war ends, and this might be still a long time from now.
So, following up on that, I want to ask you how you see the upcoming elections in Israel. If you and I think it's interesting to see how like the Trump administration and the Netanyahu administration kind of feed off one another in certain narratives that they promote, although they're also very different from one another. So one concern that I'm already hearing is voter suppressions, especially with regards to the vote of Palestinian Israelis, but I also heard some of his party members talking about, the kibbutzim will send their dead to vote and things like that, which are narratives that really are more common in the United States. And I don't remember hearing them
They
in that
existed in
sense.
Israel, but they
Yeah.
turned the table around.
Yeah, yeah. The second is about the Mizrahi vote. So you mentioned that Middle Eastern Jews who suffered from discrimination, especially, although not exclusively, under labor Zionism, have been traditionally voting for Likud, specific and sort of the era of the 1980s, where Likud really supported Mizrahi communities, often shown as kind of a success story. Um, in the past years, though, we've seen that, there's splits around the Mizrahi question in the Likud. There were racist anti-Mizrahi statements within the Likud party itself. A recent scandal from another Netanyahu advisor that was thrown under the bus showed that, like, one of his key advisors called Moroccan Jews baboons, and really like disgusting language. We see the rise within labor Zionism of a new Mizrahi left, like people like Naama Lazimi and others. So my question is, again, like how much this election might change policies? How much can we anticipate voter suppression because of anxieties of change? And do you think that actually the traditional Israeli voting blocks might change?
I think that in terms of voting suppression, this is not something new. In 2015, famously, Netanyahu said on election day that the Arabs are moving en masse to the voting stations.
Polls.
on buses paid by the leftist organizations, and therefore the government of the right wing is in danger. They talked in 2019 about installing security cameras in voting places in order to suppress and to scare the Palestinian voters. They are still trying to delegitimize the members of the Knesset from the Palestinian parties, and I think that they will try, to push very strong in the Knesset committees and also in the Supreme Court to disqualify some of the Palestinian representatives. So all of those tricks, you know, come up routinely every elections. I think that I have a very grim, understanding of how the election is going to unfold, and I think that Netanyahu understands the engineering of the Israeli politics and the Israeli society better than anyone else. I think that this war is actually going to we see so if the center left, right, the Labour Party wanted to present a viable alternative to Netanyahu, this would have been great time for them to stand up and say this war is a mistake from the beginning. It's going to, just I'm not talking about universal values, but just in terms of like the cost to the Israeli economy, the damages, the loss of school days for Israeli kids that didn't have a normal school year since COVID. Um, and just talking to the interest of the Israeli Jewish population, they could have voiced some kind of another vision, but they didn't. So they left the entire message in front to Netanyahu and his amplifiers. They didn't try to challenge Netanyahu, and even Naama Lazimi, who is considered to be, on the left side of the Labour Party. On many occasions since the war started, said that it's a justified war, and Netanyahu and Israel is united in this war. So again, the only for Netanyahu, this is the ideal situation to launch his campaign, because everyone agrees that he leads a justified war right now, and I will say that it's a win-win for him. If the regime collapses, he did it. If the regime stays, the Iranian threat is alive, and only he can handle it, because only he had the courage to fight, to go on this war, to unite the world. So he can't lose. And I think that he also understands the dynamics within the Israeli political center, that will eventually tilt the votes to his direction. Uh, and so, yeah, buckle up.
I actually disagree with you. I think
Okay.
that and again, I have more questions, but I think that even if his you know, your dream changes. Even if tomorrow, Cyrus came back from the dead and led Iran, people will not forget his sort of failures since October 7th and onwards. The soldiers from the soldiers to the civilians, and I think the opposition parties, they play the game. So right now they're silent, but once something goes wrong, they will do to him what he did to Olmert in 2006. They're also quite calculated,
I,
don't you
I
think?
hope you're right. I hope you're right. I really hope you're right. But I don't think that they have the kind of powers that he has over the Israeli public.
I don't know. Okay. Okay. We
Well,
won't get into this because we can have this at the Q&A. I do want to ask about sort of his right-wing coalition. And you already mentioned like the Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and these characters in the government, and especially from Ben-Gvir, the whole language of Amalek, elimination, annihilation of the Arab enemy is kind of originating. And right now we are witnessing really despicable pogroms in the West Bank. And I don't think that, I mean, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, certainly this party sort of prolonged the assault on Gaza much, much more than I think even some of the right-wing parties planned, and certainly delayed the release of hostages. But now do have this phenomenon of these despicable pogroms. So do you think they're connected to the war in Iran, that they're doing it under the guise of the war with Iran? Or do you think actually that this is part of this would happen regardless of the war? And then how can we envision them stopping? Um, I saw a statement that was put by the Sons of Tel Aviv University, and they said the following: these acts, referring to the pogroms, which include severe harm to persons and property, intimidation, humiliation, and displacement, have in some cases escalated into shocking acts of murder. This phenomena had intensified over the past month under the cover of the war with Iran. Again, a question: is it under the war in Iran? As citizens of the State of Israel, we bear heavy moral responsibility and feel deep shame in the face of this rampant Jewish terrorism. We protest the failure of the government and security forces to act with the necessary resolve against this phenomenon by using all means at their disposal. Terror directed against innocent civilians does not change according to the identity of the perpetrator and the victim. Terror is terror and must be eradicated. The State of Israel, as the authority responsible for the territories, bears clear obligation under international and Israeli law to ensure the safety and well-being of all residents, Jews and Palestinians alike. Beyond this legal duty, the government bears a paramount a moral obligation not to permit shedding the blood in the West Bank, whether by action or failure to act. As people who have experienced pogroms and persecution driven by racism, we're bound to remember where such a path might lead. We must not stay idly by, and that's a very important historical reference. History teaches us that at times of war, human rights are often pushed to the margins in the name of the demands of the moment or the pursuit of victory. We refuse to accept this reality. Jewish terrorism serves no legitimate purpose. On the contrary, it erodes the very foundations of its existence. And so I won't continue reading it, but there is a strong statement. There is at least a recognition that these things are happening. And yet, is it because of the war? Is it under the war? What happens when the war ends? And again, given the fact that Ben-Gvir is the minister of security and is in charge of jails, detainees, um, has a huge platform, and that the ministers in the government are connected to that. So again, the pogroms in the West Bank and the war, connections, disconnections, future.
so I think that it started on a much smaller scale. I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. It was it was called the Youth Hills, the Hilltop, the Hilltop Youth.
Yeah, some
Uh,
use.
yeah, and they usually their vandalism was dismissed as kind of mischievous behavior of unruly uh, adolescent. But I mean, in the past 5 years, 6 years, when the leadership of the sectors from which those hilltop youth emerged, became part of the Knesset and part of the coalition, they feel much more emboldened to escalate it and again to lead pogroms that are murderous. Um, Now, so it started before the war, and it would have, the kind of forgiving attitude of the law enforcement of the army to those people didn't really discourage them from doing so. And the right wing in Israel played double game here, dual game. The leaders of the yeshivot in the West Bank, you know, offered some kind of condemnation when it went too far, but they always felt that it was wrong to hit them too hard because their intentions are good. And the political leadership never really bothered to do anything about it because it served the long-term vision of
Exactly.
expanding the settlements, of expanding the Israeli sovereignty in the West Bank, of limiting the Palestinian ability of movement and sense of security. Um, and now, during when the war started, when the October war started, it actually all the attention was given to Gaza and then to Lebanon and other places that it really came under the radar and they became it intensified tenfold than what it used to be before the October war. Uh, Also because there was no media attention given to it. And few journalists really tried to raise concerns about it and to call attention, and they showed screenshots from group chats that they coordinated those attacks. But law enforcement, as we said, became the police became a branch of Ben Gvir, who considered himself to be the patron saint of the Hilltop youth. So I don't think that without the call that you read of the Tel Aviv University faculty is incredibly important and poignant, and I think that in the Israeli liberal secular population, they feel the horror and disgust from those occurrences. Um, but only, I think, international pressure now would lead Israel to do something to stop it or to stop it, not to control
Mhm.
it.
That's it occurs to me that we call them youth, but like some of these seem like grown-ass men. So,
Yeah.
but that's, again, a separate question. I have another million
Yeah, it's
challenges,
it's
but
all the
again,
all the terminology that
the
yeah,
youth.
they use.
Okay, so the youth. So again, I have some questions, but I'll have two more questions and then we'll open it up because we already have questions in the chat. So the two last questions have to do with Lebanon and the relationship with the United States. So, if we're looking at the relationship with the United States between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, it seems that initially they were very friendly. And Trump kind of supported in his first administration the shift of the capital to Jerusalem, or recognizing that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, the Golan Heights. But later on, according to reports by Barak David, he was very, very angry at Benjamin Netanyahu for accepting the presidency of Joe Biden and recognizing the results of the elections. And then the relationships were kind of amended. However, this summer, it was actually Trump and his closest advisors like Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner that actually, it seems to me, imposed the hostage deal and kind of and what is called the ceasefire on Netanyahu. Um, Now, it seems also that the relationship now are very personal. So they're not related on APAC and mediators. They're more like his people working, like President Trump's people working with Prime Minister Netanyahu's people. But what happens next? Like if oil prices are high and this thing ends not well for the United States, there's a lot of criticism here. Is it possible that President Trump will throw Bibi under the bus as well? Now, how do you see it in the framing of uh, changing relationship with between Israelis and the United States? So you've mentioning the fact that critics have pointed out that sort of Netanyahu left this idea that Zionism should be a bipartisan support and really cultivated a relationship with Christian Zionists, evangelical Zionists, the right, even at the cost of relationship with President Obama. Now we see a split also in the right, right? So it's not just Mike Huckabee and Ted Cruz. It's also Tucker Carlson challenging them. So the right is split. Um, you sort of have very, very critical Jewish voices of this government, from all the way to anti-Zionist voices to people who said, well, I identify as Zionist, but it doesn't mean that I support Netanyahu, the Israeli government, and so forth. So, what is the future of this relationship? Do you see kind of President Trump sort of saying, okay, this guy is toxic. I'm not dealing with him. Do you see the relationship kindled? And more so, like how do you see the future of this relationship with changing positions um, towards Israel amongst Americans in general and American Judaism in particular? You
That's
don't have to answer.
no, I'll say, look, it's
And
hard
I'm
to,
asking you to predict the future, which
yeah,
is
it's hard to
unfair.
read the tea leaves here, right? I think that as you said, for Trump, everything is personal. When he thought that his relationship with Netanyahu served him, he was willing to be very generous with what American support can do, including the JCPOA, including the Jerusalem the recognition of Jerusalem, the Golan Heights, and everything. The moment that Netanyahu dared to say that Biden won the elections, it was like a betrayal. But then Netanyahu also, was happy to jump into the American political game again before the 24 elections in favor of Trump. So they became best buddies again. I think that there is a profound shift in the uh, American approach to Israel, the American public approach to Israel. And this is something that you see. There was a poll that came out a couple of days ago that for the first time since they started polling, more Americans view Palestinian more favorably than they view Israelis. So and this is something that we see among, as you said, it's across the board. Right now, the only demographics that are still cheering for the Israel-U.S. alliance are the centrist Democrats and the evangelical Republicans. The America First leaders, and I have to qualify it because we see all the Tucker Carlson and his like Marjorie Taylor Greene and all of them kind of turned their back on Trump's work with Israel right now and the war. But again, I'm going to the polls that were released last week in CNN that 100% of voters who define themselves MAGA, so contrary to the MAGA leaders, 100% of voters that consider themselves MAGA support the war and support Trump. The overall support in the American public is about 40%, but the diehard Trumpists and the diehard MAGA Republicans are fully in support. 80%, 89% of Republican voters support the war. This is not marginal.
Okay.
Uh, and it the longer the war remains, it's going to change the opinion about the war and about Israel and about Trump. But if Trump will conclude the war in the coming days or weeks, he will be able to turn around the narrative and just in time before the midterm elections. And but in the long run, I think that the Jewish American public will forever, I think, really change the way that they talk about Israel. Again, it's not a unified voice, but American Jews change the way that they talk about it, and you don't have like all you have to do is to go to the mainstream Jewish publications in the U.S. Um, Moment Magazine, Forward, to see the kind of op-eds that they run now. Those would have been unimaginable 3 years ago.
Yeah. No, I mean there are two kind of polling directions that are happening now with American jury. I think one is like the shifting ideas about Israel, and the second is the sort of the rise of anti-Semitism, not like the criticism of Israel, like proper old
Yeah.
school. And I don't know how that is gonna shape, relationships in the future. But again, larger conversation. Finally, very, very last question. There is also a war that in the media is not spoken about, and that's the war in Lebanon, which you've mentioned in passing. And again, there is sort of a question about why Israel opened a second front. So the way it's explained to the Israeli public is that they wanted to show that the military sort of creates a buffer between them and Hezbollah. And there was also a fear of re-evacuating the north, as happened after October 7th. But at the same time, sort of Netanyahu's promises of disarming Hezbollah, and especially like that Hezbollah has sort of evaporated after September 24th, and the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, that is also was called into question right now, because this is a war. Like there's bomb, from the Israeli perspective, shelling of the Israeli north. From the Lebanese perspective, 800,000, I think, evacuated, 1,000 dead. It's taking the toll of Israelis. So how and again it's a front that was sort of decided upon by the Israeli leadership. The sort of the responses um, and so I want to ask as a last question is how do you see that front? Is it going to even after the war with Iran, let's say, ends, is it going to continue, or is it going to be some kind of a dual end? I mean, this is something now that Iran is raising in the negotiations. But there are also statements that this will be an independent front. So how do you see that situation, which is again something that like such a massive change in sort of power relations in the region is not even being reported about because of the gravity of in certain channels because of the gravity of the situation with Iran.
I think that it's the same story of the 12-day war and the supposed achievements of the war, right? Netanyahu and Trump said that they obliterated the Iranian nuclear project. They removed the risk, which seemed to be resurfacing 6 months later. After the war with Hezbollah last year or 2 years ago, who can remember anymore? They said Hezbollah is done. They have no infrastructure. They have no missiles. They got no leadership. Um, this project is done. And then we see that Iran is not really it's not true, not in the Iranian case, not in the Lebanese case, because both of them have deeper roots than just the top leadership, and they have infrastructure and they have chains of support that perhaps were not as more hidden than Israeli believed. Uh,
Okay.
and I don't know. I think that this will be. You ask why Israel reopened that front. I think that it was because they feared that Hezbollah might join the Iranian defense from the northern border, and wanted to preempt the kind of mass evacuation of the northern um, areas in Israel. But also, it's there is this need to sustain the military effort, because this is something that I tell my students. When you can either you have only two viable paths every time. One, work for peace, and one, work for war. Now, you can't choose. Status quo is actually not a viable option, because if you're not working towards a permanent agreement, you are building towards war. And I think that this is what Israel gave up on the idea. Israel under Netanyahu gave up on the idea that diplomatic negotiations can lead to security, can lead to to stability. And Netanyahu himself said it in 2015 that Israel can and will live on the sword. And this is actually the one promise that he kept, because now we see that Israel, um, you know, completely emptied the concept of diplomacy from any meaning, any significance. And I think that the idea of resolving the front in Lebanon together with the front in Iran is actually it makes sense from a geopolitical point of view.
Okay. So I have like 10 follow-ups and challenges and disagreements, but I will stop here. I will say that this conversation represents only the views of Orit, Bashkin, and Lior Sternfeld, and not the views of anybody else or the center. And now I will turn to questions. So the first question, we already have three questions even during our conversation, and I hope that people write more in the talk. So Ken Moss is asking the following. Helpful discussion, thanks. One of the presumptions of the conversation so far has been that Netanyahu is essentially unbound at this point. That is, that he's in a position to make major policy decisions more or less unilaterally, with no meaningful policy restraints by the military, intelligence, the Mossadot, gatekeepers, strategic elites, or of the parties in the coalition, much less outside of it, etc. I'm inclined to think that this is correct, but would like to hear more. Is Netanyahu free to act because of deep structural change, i.e., the picture wherein Netanyahu has managed to fundamentally destroy the Mossadot, the institutions, over the years by exploiting populist, nationalist, anti-elitists, something like what President Trump seems to have done to the U.S. political system, or is is his power to act more a product of a political paralysis coupled with security convictions, fears, etc., of the Israeli Jewish public, otherwise quite divided and not clearly rallying behind Netanyahu. To what degree is his unilateral power structural or conditional?
I think that in my opinion, it's both with some more weight given to the structural changes that he already uh, accomplished. I think that he was determined to remove the former chief of staff of the Israeli army, Herzl Halevi, after October 7th, and he offered his resignation, and Netanyahu appointed Zamir, who was considered to be exactly of the mold that Netanyahu likes, very obedient, very ideologically right wing. And then Zamir said something, I can't remember what was the occasion. He said something that Netanyahu didn't like. And then sources in Netanyahu's office said that maybe choosing Zamir was a mistake. And when they say sources in Netanyahu's office, it means Netanyahu. Um, but it's also like Netanyahu also knows how to rely on the Israeli sentiment of trauma, of pain, of grief, and harness it to his own benefit, his own political benefit. So. And I think that this is what you see now with the overwhelming support in the Jewish public to this war, because for them, like this is the war in which Netanyahu fighting the ultimate enemy. Like this is the threat that they've been hearing about for 40 something years, and Netanyahu has been prime minister for so long and has been part of the Israeli leadership for 30 years now. So it's also like a moment of culmination of the hopes and fears. The fear of what Iran might have been to Israel, and the hopes that Israel will be able to remove the threat that was hanging over the heads of Israelis. And they blame Iran for everything that happened, including October 7th. So Netanyahu knows how to use those public sentiments, and the fact that there's no opposition is very helpful again.
Okay. So Ken has another follow-up question regarding Lebanon. And he says it seems that there's one dramatic difference between Israel's aims and assumptions in Lebanon as opposed to Iran. Namely, that in Lebanon, Israel is continuing to pursue what Wendy Perelman called triadic coercion, which it's been trying since 2006. But doing so from the most advantageous position it's held against Hezbollah since the beginning. So Syria no longer is a route of supply. Iran can't rebuild Hezbollah as quickly. And large numbers of the non-Shiite Lebanese are apparently losing patience with Hezbollah and feel able to say more openly than before. I am not endorsing the position morally, one way or another, but rather asking, is it conceivable that Israeli aims in Lebanon might actually work, whereas it seems clear that they don't work in Iran?
So I think that I'll surprise you here. And I said that, yeah, I think that it might work. Um, uh, we see in the past few days or weeks more and more Lebanese members of parliament and Lebanese leaders saying that they've had it with Hezbollah and the damage that they invite to the country, and it's time to rethink the relationship with Israel. And so I think that it might work. The question is what kind of policy is awaiting us after the ceasefire. If they will be able to to work and get an achievable agreement, it would be great. But with Netanyahu, it always ends with the ceasefire, and there's no, like, it's ceasefire or war, and we need to get to a situation that there is policy goals at the end of the war.
Okay. So then we have another question that sort of asks again, I have 10,000 challenges about this, but I'll keep to the thing. We have another question that says so about asking about the global complexity, and so the talk sort of shifted the narrative about good versus evil, but the the question is, and I'm quoting, how come Netanyahu, despised by so many Israeli Jews, exercised such a stronghold over the US foreign policy? So I would mediate it and say, change it a bit and say, does he? Even to the detriment of American national interests. So how do you see sort of his political carrots and sticks? How do you see sort of ideas about greater Israel and messianic fervor kind of entering into US discourse? I would say that in my view, like there's like this idea that Zionism is a profoundly national ideology that kind of, Netanyahu reads the Bible every day. Um, is a problematic one. People don't understand the degree of secularity and the secularization of and nationalization of religious texts outside of Ben Gvir, Smotrich, those folks. But again, how do we understand sort of Israel's still position in the US? How do you see it based on this question?
So I would ask, what are the U.S. national interests? Who gets to
Yeah.
determine them? Um, I I don't think that it's useful to think that Israel, uh, solely manipulates the U.S. institutions to follow its lead. I think that when you see the record of Secretary Rubio, or even what, if you can find some kind of logic in whatever Trump said since 2016 or 2015, you can find it all over. So I think that half of the American society believes that U.S. interests are one thing, and the second half believes that U.S. interest is another thing. And the one that is in power now believes that the U.S. main interest is to become the global hegemonic power, and restore the greatness of American force. And this war is one way to do it. And we see that Trump, from before entering office in the second term, he was talking about taking Greenland and taking Venezuela and taking and making Canada the 51st state. So, like, these all lead to the same direction of the war in Iran. And I think that it's an attempt to get greater share of global trade, of global energy, and it's not the war that it's not. I think that it's not the right characterization of it, that it's Israel war that it dragged the US into. I think that Netanyahu and Trump worked very closely together on that, and we just have to ask, what are the US interests? What are the who gets to determine the national interests? And then see if the people we voted for represented those tendencies.
Okay. Okay, so any other questions that folks might want to ask in the Q&A? Okay, so I think I'll wait for a bit for people to write and see if they have. Yeah, there is question number 5. Um, yeah, okay. So I think what we'll do right now, since we're properly depressed right now, I think again that there's a venue in which I mean again it's very difficult to talk about like American politics, for example. Trump did run on like this idea that, no more wars and things like that. And there is a different vision, I think, between him and Vance, for example. I also think that, again, reading, and maybe it's wishful thinking, but listening to people, even within the Israeli establishment, that start to appreciate the war, they do, and reevaluate the war, they do talk about the fact that there is no end game, and that, and start asking questions but again, then one thing that I should add is that we haven't talked about the other components because just as Israel is not one component, although Netanyahu is deeply powerful right now, and the US is divided. Over this war. Lebanon is not one component, and certainly Iran, and the ways in which people view the war, the regime, the future is also not a unified monolith. So that's also something to think about. But let's undo these monolithic perceptions in other talks. So, Lior, thank you so much for your time and analysis and brilliance and. Again, we
Thank
will
you.
continue unpacking this. Hopefully, our talks are not going to be sort of emergency conversations about such awful realities. And let's again hope that wherever you are listening to this conversation, you, your family, your loved ones are safe. And yeah, join us to other events. So thank you very much, Lior, again.
Thank you.
Okay.